Golden Drum.
So I just kind of wanted to jump straight into this idea of the sun and the sun, and the metaphor of the journey of the sun being the external journey of the sun, and how that relates to us as individuals on the path of enlightenment. And that metaphor was really present amongst many more ancient cultures and traditions. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about that and how it factors into a lot of sacred sites and monuments that were built around the world to honor that principle. And in this picture, you have Horus as a representation of the sun, but also the divine sun. And we'll see how that story exist across multiple cultures and traditions. So I've got some readings, which I often do because I don't necessarily just flow eloquently, so I rely on writings that I select to read from. And I'm gonna probably read for about 10 minutes because I just really want to establish kind of where we are on this day and how that factors in into other moments and the cycles of the year through the solstices and equinoxes. So I'll start with that, with a little bit of reading. Some of the world's most ancient and well-known spiritual symbols also encode universal spiritual principles that are not specific to any religion. This is why many of the same or similar symbols appear throughout the world. They reveal that there is a common spiritual knowledge which people have tapped into and have then expressed according to their environment and cultures, forming different religions and traditions that were actually founded on the same eternal and universal spirituality. The work of enlightenment is found written in the cosmos, in the movement of the sun and stars, which is why so many ancient spiritual cultures incorporated celestial movements into their spiritual monuments and sacred texts. This is what life is created for, so no wonder we find it reflected to us from the heavens and intrinsic to everything around us. This is so we can always discover our true purpose for being here and realize our own spiritual potential. The creative process which gives birth to the universe also gives birth to the spiritual within a human. Thus, the divine Savior is not just born into the world, they can be born within us, into the symbolic stables, prisons, caves, which is the spirit entering into the humble and limited fleshly vehicle of the body. The path is one that is mirrored in the heavens with the movements of the celestial bodies and is found imbued in every fabric of life. It has been enacted by humans throughout time and takes place within a spiritually prepared person. It is the basis of the work of awakening, and at the solstices and equinoxes, ancient peoples celebrated its stages in tune with the natural rhythms of the sun and seasons, which are permeated by its principles. This intrinsic relationship between the principles of life and spirituality is one of the reasons why so many ancient sacred sites, texts, and celebrations combine spiritual and natural phenomena. They can be read in the world around us just as they were by ancient spiritual peoples, as they are timeless and ever present. Around 3 days following the summer solstice, the sun begins to descend in the sky, and darkness begins to increase as the nights begin to lengthen toward winter. This symbolizes the consciousness, the eternal spark of light within each person, the seed of inner potential, coming out from the divine source and descending into the darkness of matter in the material world, from heaven to earth, to learn and awaken through the process of life, like the seed which is produced from the tree at summer. On a personal spiritual level, it also symbolizes the beginning of a new journey on the path to enlightenment. At the autumn equinox, day and night are equal, but from the autumn equinox onward, there is more darkness than light. This is the time of inner death, and the descent into the underworld to face and overcome one's own inner darkness in preparation for the birth of the spiritual Sun, S-O-N, and Sun, S-U-N, within. Many deities descended into the underworld, Hades, hell, at this time of year, as the seed of the inner potential remains dormant indefinitely and does not germinate unless it goes into the earth and dies. As the course of the sun throughout the year can also be found in its course through one day, the autumn equinox corresponds to the time of sunset. And where we are now, at the winter solstice, darkness is at its maximum, but there is hope in the winter sunrise from which the light gradually increases. This is the time of the birth of the spiritual sun within, and why so many solar deities were born at the winter solstice, including Jesus. Of course, there were many other ones, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The winter solstice finds its parallel to the time of midnight, from which the sun will begin its return toward morning, and why Christmas Mass was held at midnight. The divine sun starts as something small, like a child, and grows within, just as the sun at winter and seed beneath the ground, toward the summer solstice, transforming someone spiritually as it does. At the spring equinox, day and night are once again equal, but from this time onward, light is greater than darkness, just as it is from sunrise each morning. This is the time of inner crucifixion and death, resurrection, the triumph over darkness, and attainment of eternal spiritual life, and why so many deities die and later come back to life to live eternally at this time, such as Jesus, Osiris, and the Mayan Hunahpu. And the life of spring bursts forth to defeat the forces of darkness and death in the light of the triumphant sun. And lastly, on our journey of the sun, at the summer solstice, the sun has ascended to its highest point in the sky, and the light is at its greatest, symbolizing enlightenment and awakening. This is the time of the ascension from earth to heaven, the return to wholeness of being and the divine source from which consciousness originated. Like the flowers and fruits of summer, this is the time when the life of the spirit is at full bloom and corresponds to midday and the sun's daily journey. So, I kind of just want to establish that and remember the observation of the journey of the sun and kind of the key points of the solstices and equinoxes and how that permeates through symbolism into our mythologies and sacred texts and stories and sacred monuments. So almost all of the well-known or really magnificent monuments were aligned to either the solstices or the equinoxes, honoring this exact principle. And there's a layer of symbolism that is often kind of cast and put on things to preserve the knowledge and the information from the destructive forces that come in at different ages and different times. So symbolism is another really deep aspect of what we study, and a very deep aspect of the initiatic traditions, regardless of which kind of variation or breed of initiatic tradition. At the end of the day, behind all the cultural masks and veils, there's a pure symbolic level that really relates to our place within the cosmos, and why study of astrology and other things really comes into play and was perhaps one of the most sacred of the sciences. So I'll read just a touch on monuments and symbolism, and then we'll cruise through some slides, and then we'll have Tad give us some enlightening conversation. So, monuments as symbols. Some traditions of celebrating the solstice and equinox still survive today, although many others passed into history. While traditions often change their shape or lose their meaning through time, these stone monuments have withstood thousands of years. They were purposely built as giant symbols, and thus have kept a knowledge of the process of enlightenment and greater spiritual significance of the solstice and equinox, encoded into their structures for us to read today. An understanding of the symbols used in these ancient sites reveals that many were representing the same spiritual process around the same cosmic events. They indicate the existence of a cosmic spirituality, which could be described as an ancient solar religion shared by people separated by vast distances in time who all tapped into the same universal knowledge and understanding. The knowledge encoded into their design tells us that what happens above is related to our world below, and most importantly, to ourselves. They show the great link between the human and divine, the personal and the cosmic, and were centered around the process of awakening. Over the time, their knowledge became distorted and lost as they were infiltrated by dark forces and people degenerated. When this happens, civilizations are no longer able to hold themselves together, having turned on the very principles that allow them to do so, and thus they fall into barbarism and ruin. What were originally spiritual celebrations either degenerated or were inverted to include human and animal sacrifice and all manner of debauchery, such as found in the mad parties of Sol Invictus in Rome and the blood revelry of the Aztecs. This degeneration, which happened in some cases over hundreds to thousands of years to different cultures, has in many instances associated the solstices and equinoxes with the worst of human behavior. So that's sort of where, this kind of gets cast as pagan rituals, and the whole kind of meaning gets pushed down through religious dogma. However, looking back today with the same shared knowledge as the original esoteric builders, one can recognize the knowledge of universal spirituality in their ruins and preserved texts, which preceded and survived the degeneration, allowing someone with esoteric experience and knowledge to understand ancient mysteries where archaeologists and academics remain in the dark. So that's a lot of what we study in the realm of symbolism, is kind of digging deeper past the literal translations of things and really finding what's the cosmic principles that are driving our sacred traditions. So this is a hieroglyphic from the Karnak temple in Egypt, the temple of Amun-Ra, which is like the highest, most revered deity from the Egyptian pantheon. And we have the Annunciation story there. The picture in the top center is the solstice, Winter Solstice alignment that illuminates the corridors and channels the sun into the back chamber in the Holy of Holies and casts light on Amun-Ra. So it's like the insemination, the seed is being inseminated and penetrating the holiest of chambers, and in that metaphor of the sun giving birth to the divine son. And in that you have the Annunciation scene, which is the same as we have with Jesus and Mary. So you have on the left, where what's been marked in yellow is the that's the sort of primordial waters. The goddess Neith, I believe, is being informed by Thoth that she's going to conceive. And above that you have the Christian interpretation and painting of the Annunciation. So that's the announcement in the yellow block. Then she's in the blue block. Neith is being impregnated with the Ankh. So this is the Immaculate Conception taking place. And then to the right in the peach block, you have Neith on the birthing stone, and she's essentially giving birth at that point. And then below in the mint green, it's a little bit harder to tell, but that's the birth and the celebration of the birth. And if you look to the right amongst the birth there's three magi, essentially. Like the left hand is up with the Ankh. Well, they all have their hands up with the Ankh, honoring life. And then the right hand is down with the offering of the gifts. So these are the three magi. So, and then this story, exists in other cultures. And then there's often the death and rebirth, the birth at the winter solstice, and then resurrection at the spring equinox. So this is just one example of how this mythology and symbolism plays out, but it really relates to a deeper story, and that's the journey of the sun and that metaphor that we mentioned at the beginning. So just looking at a couple of sacred sites that are aligned to the winter solstices. This is the mound at Newgrange, Ireland. And I don't recall off the top of my head how many thousands of years it holds, but it definitely predates Christianity.
It's 5,000.
5,000? So about 5,000 years old. And you can sort of see to the right, that's the solstice alignment, where if you look in the middle bottom image, that opening is a special opening that sort of channels and receives that light down the womb, down the chamber into the womb. So this is that idea of the sun is giving birth, and then birth is taking place in the feminine womb. And the entrance to that is on the megalithic stone. You see the spiral structure, which I think Tad will discuss the spiral in depth. So I'm gonna let him touch on that, but definitely an important aspect of the cosmos. And then we have the Gate of the Sun in Tiwanaku, Bolivia. And so these sites are all alignments and calendar systems. So in the image on the right, this is actually supposed to be an animated image that doesn't seem to be animating, but you see and June 21st is not the winter solstice as it's labeled there.
But it is in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah, oh, yeah, you're right, thank you. So the sun moves it along, and each month lands on one of the standing zones at the sun gate. So at the equinoxes, it goes actually directly in the middle. And then at the summer solstice, it goes all the way to the left side. And then it makes its journey back. So this is a site that's sort of marking that. And I think archaeologists don't really agree about how old this structure is. It's relatively modern according to mainstream archaeology, but there's the field and science of archaeoastronomy, which usually these megalithic builders and temple builders didn't really make mistakes in their alignments. And it seems quite possible that this site goes back to more like 15,000 years ago. And that all has to do with looking at the constellations and the alignments between the stars and sort of what's in their cultures and mythology, talking about what the alignments and things are. So, but that's another example. And this is a really wonderful example in England, the site of Glastonbury Tor, where you have this sort of magnificent hill and mound with the tower on top. And what happens on the winter solstice is the sun, as it makes its journey across the sky, actually rolls up that hill. Along the horizon of the hill, it like rolls up the hill, and then where the person is standing in the image of the left, the sun sits there at the exact moment of the solstice, and then it rolls back down the hill. It's just like, I wish I had an animation of that. And, incredible monument and alignment, all honoring this time. So all of the sites that I've chosen are honoring today, essentially, or what we're here celebrating. Oh, and this is a fun one in the spirit of Christmas and Santa Claus and looking at symbolism. So this isn't necessarily very well accepted amongst a lot of mainstream kind of ideas, but you can't ignore it, so I figured I would at least present it. So everyone knows the Amanita Muscaria mushroom, the Alice in Wonderland mushroom, which is really prevalent in Russia and Siberia. And it's a sacred sacrament to the shamans and the indigenous teachers in Siberia. And in the top middle picture, you have a shaman. And that's their clothing and dress, because that sacrament, it takes them on the journey to explore the sacred realms and the mysteries. And it's really interesting, the one who actually has the beard with the red hat, you know.
Real beard?
I mean, yeah, it's a fake beard. Yeah, that's definitely not a real beard. And I'm not sure how that factors into part of the tradition. But when I grabbed that image, they were both together. So I was like, well, okay, this is definitely supporting the story at least. So that's like a typical, in the bottom center, that's like the typical, you know, yurt hut dwelling. And that's clearly not in the winter months, but the shamans or the collectors would go out, and the reindeer would ingest the sacred mushroom. Like, they really love that stuff. They eat it like crazy. And they would essentially urinate, which would in some ways filter out a lot of toxins. So in addition to maybe just eating the mushrooms, the reindeer was an essential aspect of this gathering of the sacred sacrament. So they would actually gather the urine of the reindeer. And then by the time the shamans would come back, or the collectors would come back, there would often be so much snow that they wouldn't be able to get back into their huts or dwelling. So they would have to climb into the top and go down the chimney, enter through the suite. So this is really very likely the origin of the whole chimney, Santa Claus, Santa in the North Pole, the flight, the reindeer. This is really a lot, well, just very likely where some of that symbolism and mythology came from. And it's really interesting to see in the images on the right. These are Victorian era images where you see the chimney sweep imagery being very much related to the Amanita muscaria mushroom, which is kind of compelling evidence that like what does that have to do with anything? Why the mushroom and Victorian chimney sweep? Like, where did that come from? So this is probably where this is all coming from. So
changes the meaning of yellow snow.
yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. When in Siberia, I guess maybe look for the yellow snow. So anyway, in the spirit of our holiday season and a little fun, I thought I would throw that in.
Yeah.
Exposed.
Yeah, revealed. So I don't know. I guess use that story at your discretion at the family Christmas dinner. Don't quote me like, oh, Sadek said this. So this is bringing us into the introduction, more formal introduction of AT Man, who has joined us today. And I just wanted to share a little bit about how I came to know of his work, and being someone very interested in the symbolic arts and the expressions of visionary art. I was doing searches, as I often do, and stumbled across some of these images, which are from a series of mandalas that Tad made in the 70s?
1975.
In 75, so that was the year I was born. So, so I started to see these and was like, okay, there's a lot of knowledge and information being packed into these, and I have to understand this stuff, but I don't really get it yet. But maybe I'll talk to this guy one day. Like, no, yeah, that'll never happen. So I kept, sitting with these and studying these images, and eventually I reached out to him. He lives in Hudson, New York, and long story short, I told this story at our last class, but so very long story, very short. I reached out to him. Within 24 hours, he was in Atlanta at my parents' house having dinner. And then we met up back in New York. And yeah, I can tell anyone that story because it's fascinating. So see me afterwards if you'd like to know more about that. So I think definitely a cosmic arrangement, and which has now been extended to our family here. Sorry, I'm just sort of blasting through. So that led to what I'll call our Saturday sessions. Tad comes to the city every so often, and we would meet up on Saturdays and spend 4 or 5 hours together. Just the conversations would go everywhere. So I finally had a professional astrology report done, and this is from one of our meetings and discussions of Kabbalah and symbols and everything, and which kind of further led to us doing a little video together, which is a work in progress, because I was trying to understand these calendars and systems and symbols, and realizing even though he has 14, 18 books published, there's not really a deep discussion or description of what in the heck is going on with that. And I was like, okay, we have to do this because I want to understand, and we might as well record it so other people can understand. So I'm really happy that he's here with us today, and our Saturday sessions have extended to a whole deep family on a Winter Solstice celebration. So these are just some of the books that Tad has authored over the years, and I think with that we'll get on into his presentation.
It looks like a lot of books.
Indeed it is. So Tad studied architecture at Cornell University, and I think being a child of the 60s, began to do some explorations like many people, kind of wandered around on the downtown New York scene and lived around. He's got more adventures than any of us could, squeeze in one lifetime. So it's always fascinating to just watch his stories meander. I think with that, we'll invite you up to the chair as you or wherever you're most comfortable. But so.